Well, there is this trap that can catch quite a few of us, and that is the desire for greatness. A lot of us have, I would say most of us, if given the choice between being below average, average, good, or great, most of us would probably, in somewhere in ourselves, want to be great. I remember when I was in 6th grade, we had just moved to a different city than where I had lived up until that point. I was in a new school. I didn't know any of the teachers, except for the teacher that I had, because I hadn't had any of the other ones. And at the end of the school year, they called the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade grades. This was a kindergarten through 8th grade school, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th were shuffled into the assembly hall, into the auditorium, and we all sat down. This is at the end of the school year, and this was during class, so that was a bonus because it got us out of class. But what happened was that they invited the 4th grade teachers to come up, and so it began with the principal talking and saying what a great year it had been, and the faculty have been amazing, and we have such wonderful parent support of our school, and just different nice things to say. And then he invited up the 4th grade teachers to give out the end of school awards. So the 4th grade teachers go up there, and the most extroverted of those 3 teachers takes the mic and talks about what a great year it had been, and thank you all for being here, because there were parents in the room, and we've had a great year in 4th grade. And then they began to give out the awards in each of the 3 4th grade classes. And so there was an award for perfect attendance. And so the kids that had perfect attendance were brought up. And then there was an award for most improved academically, and so they named a few kids who came up. And there was an award for citizenship, and there was an award for straight A's, and there was an award for no conduct marks. And, so that any of you teachers familiar with this kind of process, this sort of ritual? And so then the 5th grade teachers did it after all those 4th graders got theirs, and then the 6th grade teachers came up. Through the whole thing, as I'm sitting there as a 6th grader, I begin to get really nervous because I really, really want to get an award. And so each 6th grade teacher did it, and my 6th grade teacher was the last one. And so I'm just sitting there, oh my goodness, I hope I get an award. And I knew, I didn't have perfect attendance because I had a terrible bike accident that year, and it took me out for a couple of weeks. So that was. I'm not eligible for the perfect attendance award. And I was not a kid who started off poorly academically and then got better and better through the year. I believe in consistency. So I was consistently really pretty good, But I wasn't going to get, so I knew I couldn't get the most improved award because, how do you improve on, this? And so, but I also knew I wouldn't get the straight A award because I had an A- and I had a B+. And they don't give awards for that, which is pathetic. But anyway, I knew I was not eligible for many of the awards, but I thought, surely there's got to be one award in there somewhere that I could get. And they went through the whole thing, and I did not get any awards. And as we left the assembly hall, and the kids who got awards were comparing their certificates to each other, I felt pretty low. But these kids that got the certificates, they were the great ones. And those of us who walked out of there without the certificates, we were not the great ones. And there's something about being great that requires that we outdo and outshine other people. In the world that we live in, if you want to be considered great, you are going to have to outperform everybody else in something, even if it's, develop a strategy of getting a few F's in the beginning of the school year so you can fake improvement. Yeah, I'm not bitter about it at all. But if you don't outshine and outdo, then it's hard to be considered great. So I'm going to ask you now to do something that you may or may not want to do, but you're going to have to do it anyway. I want you to turn to a person next to you, and and you can group in threes or whatever, but I want you to find somebody to talk with, and for 30 seconds, one of you is going to share about a time when you did not receive an award that you wanted to get. A time when you did not receive an award that you wanted to get. This will be very difficult for people like Emily Everett, but for most of us, this won't be hard. So for 30 seconds, one of you speaks, and then I'll call time, and then you switch, okay? Go. Okay, let's switch. Let's switch. So switch partners if you haven't already. Okay, so if you were not able to completely share, we have a great coffee bar that's out in the atrium after the service. Please share your stories. And if you were seated alone and you did not find a partner, I hope that at least you could be thinking through a time when you had hoped to get an award, but you didn't actually receive it. Those can be difficult memories. For some of us, those are painful memories. And I think they're painful because, there are things about us that a lot of people never see. And we may not get recognized for those things. And so the world that we live in is a world that says the great ones are the ones that outdo and outshine. But is that the world that God lives in? Is that descriptive of the way that God sees things? When we go to Mark chapter 9, in verse 33, we read that it says that then they came to Capernaum, and these would be Jesus and his disciples. They came to a town called Capernaum. Capernaum is on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. It is an absolutely beautiful place. The temperature there is like the ideal temperature for the species that we call human beings. And it is comfortable. It cools down at night to a temperature that you can easily sleep. It's not anything like a lot of the Holy Land. So if you were the creator of the universe and you came in the flesh, where would you set up your ministry? So Jesus was a smart man. So he settles down in Capernaum, and it says that they had returned to Capernaum. That was their home base of operations, and most of their ministry, his ministry, moved in and out of around Capernaum. So he was in the house, and he asked his disciples, because they had been walking back to Capernaum, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent. They did not respond to Jesus' question about what they were arguing, because they knew that what they were arguing about was probably not the kind of topic that Jesus would have appreciated. And so he knew, because it says they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." So in the world's way of looking at things, if you want to be great in this world, you have to outdo everybody else by your accomplishments, by your status, by your achievements. But in God's world, it's about service. It's not about being the first, it's about being the last. It's not about outshining everybody else. It's about serving everybody else. It's not about being at the top. It's actually about being at the bottom. It's not about rising up. It's about lowering yourself down. It's not about being exalted. It's about humbling yourself. If you want to be great in God's world, in God's way of thinking, then you will be last. You will be the servant of all. To be a servant is so central to our faith. Our character as a follower of Jesus Christ should be that of a servant. And what is a servant? I would say that a servant is somebody who puts the needs of everybody else ahead of yourself. A servant is a person who seeks out the needs of those around them and serves those needs rather than their own. Service-oriented groups, their money goes towards others. Service-oriented churches, their time and their resources is not directed to themselves, but to others. Servant people are people who serve the needs of people around them. It happens quite a lot that in my house, my kids and I will be home in the evening by ourselves because my wife works. She has very odd hours that she works. She works a lot of evenings, and she'll be gone from about 6 or 7 in the evening until after the kids are in bed. And actually, after she gets home after I'm in bed because I like to go to bed early. And so a lot of times I'll get the kids settled down after an evening together, and they'll be in their bedrooms asleep, and I'll be in my bedroom asleep, and I'll hear the door open, and I will hear the sound of dishes being washed and put away, and I'll hear the refrigerator, and I'll hear this clanking around, and then she'll quietly come and she'll go to sleep, and in the morning, I walk out into the kitchen, and it's pristine and beautiful. To me, that's greatness, because she's a servant. She doesn't even acknowledge that she does that. That's a servant. And we are called to be servants, not just when it suits us, not just when the church says, hey, we need a volunteer to do this thing, so we go and we do that thing and we pretend to be a servant for a few hours, and then we go back to our selfish ways, okay? That's personal testimony. We're called to be a servant throughout our entire life, especially in those places that nobody notices, especially to the people that are closest to us. So servanthood begins with our immediate relatives and family and the people that are in our life. But who else are we called to be a servant to? Well, Jesus doesn't stop by saying just be a servant. If we go back to that passage, it says that he sat down. This is in verse 35. He sat down. Now, that's an important detail. He didn't sit down because he was tired. He sat down because to sit down for a rabbi meant he was about to teach. Rabbis took the posture of sitting when they would teach. They didn't teach standing. So when it says he sits down, it indicates he's about to teach something. Okay, so he sits down, and he said to them, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Then he took a child. He took a child and put it among them, and taking the child into his arms, he said, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. Children in that time were not considered to be full human beings. Now for us, we love children. Our vision is about reaching children. Our hearts, most of us, unless we're cold-hearted, mean people, we love children. And we welcome children. But in this time, it was different. And these days, we're talking 2,000 years ago, a child was like a non-human. They were like not a full, complete person. They were not considered to have any kind of value until they were able to work. So until they were of an age that they could work, children were seen and not heard, maybe not even seen. They were just, pushed to the side. So it was totally audacious for Jesus to grab a child and bring that child into the center of a teaching moment between a rabbi and his students. It's even more audacious that he would take this child into his arms. It's even more audacious that he would say this, that he would say, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. Now, what he's referring to is a cultural practice that in those days, if you wanted to be great, your greatness was established by who you entertained, who you showed hospitality to. In those days, if you showed hospitality to somebody that was of a social stature that was equal or better to your own, that would elevate your status. And that was a common practice. You remember how excited Zacchaeus was when Jesus says, I'm going to come and dine in your home? That was because Jesus was a person of status, and Zacchaeus was excited to have somebody who he could entertain in his home. Hospitality is all about service. Hospitality is all about serving the needs of your guest. And so for Jesus to say, when you show hospitality to a child, to a non-person, to a person who has very, very little value, when you show hospitality to a person who is of the lowest social stature, you are not only welcoming that child, but you are welcoming me. So who are we called to serve? Everybody. We're called to serve everybody. Not just the people we like, not just the people who think, look, act like us, but everybody, and especially the people who are pushed to the side and forgotten. If we want to be great, we can be. Everyone can be great. You don't have to get the citizenship award. You don't have to be the most improved student. You don't have to win any trophies at all. Everyone can be great. All it takes is a humble spirit and a willingness to serve the needs of people around you. Everyone can be great in God's world. There's a passage in 2 Corinthians in chapter 5, verse 10, and it says this. Paul says, "For all of us must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each may receive recompense for what has been done in the body, whether good or evil." And what is the image here is that there will come a time when you and I will stand before the throne of God and we will review our life together. And what will God say to us? When we look back on our life in that moment, will God be saying, good job on that low golf score, good job on that citizenship award, hey, I'm really proud of you for getting your plaque up on that wall? Probably not. Not if Jesus is right. Because if Jesus is right, God's going to want to talk about how you served. Everyone can serve. Everyone can be great. And in that moment, won't it be wonderful to hear God say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Now that will be an award ceremony worth being at. Amen.